I am going to reveal to you something older than the scripture. The monad call. An ancient text says, the reincarnation is not a gift. It's the mechanism they use to keep your soul recycled forever. In the next few minutes, you will discover something that was buried beneath the comfort of every religion that ever told you to be good, live right, and come back again. What if reincarnation is not the reward? What if the wheel of rebirth is not a ladder climbing toward the light, but a cage designed to look like one? What if every time you have died, every time you have crossed through the veil, every time you have returned to this world not knowing who you were, that was not cosmic evolution, that was capture? And the one who remembers is watching this right now, because something deep inside already suspects it. You did not find this channel. This transmission found you. Because there is a difference between those who live inside the story and those who begin to read the hand writing it. And tonight, we read the hand. There are two kinds of people watching this. Those who will hear what follows and feel a strange recognition, like a word returning to a tongue that forgot its own language. And those who will dismiss it, scroll past it, laugh at it, and return to the dream they were given at birth. The first group, they are the seeker. They are the one who remembers. They are why this archive exists. And what I am about to lay before you has been hidden inside Gnostic texts, suppressed by councils of men who feared what an awakened soul could not be made to do. It has been encoded in the Nag Hammadi scriptures, whispered in the Valentinian schools of Alexandria, carved in metaphor inside the Pistis Sophia. And it says this, plainly, terribly, beautifully. Reincarnation is not liberation. It is the oldest trap in the architecture of existence. Before we go deeper, before we descend into the mechanism itself, understand where this knowledge comes from. Not from one text, not from one teacher, but from an entire tradition of souls who looked at this world and said, this is not the Father's house. This is something else. The Gnostics were not simply a sect. They were a current, a living fire that burned inside diverse groups spread across Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia, and the Roman world from the 1st century onward. They called themselves by different names: the Sethians, the Valentinians, the Ophites, the Mandeans. But they shared one foundational wound, a gnosis, a knowing that this visible world was not created by the highest God. It was created by something lesser, something arrogant, something that looked upon its own creation and declared itself the only God, not knowing there was an infinite silence above it, vast and unmoved. The Gnostics called this creator the demiurge, the craftsman, the false sovereign, and they taught that the human soul, the divine spark lodged inside flesh, did not belong here. It fell, or worse, it was pulled. Now, before we descend into the first movement, if this is already disturbing something inside you, if the word trap is still ringing, consider sharing this with one person who has always felt like a stranger in this world. They may be a seeker who has not yet found the door. And subscribe to the Gnostic Archive if you have not already, because what comes next, the 4 movements of the recycling machine, these are not theories. These are the mechanics of the prison itself, and you need every piece. The first movement, the monad and the wound of creation. To understand why reincarnation is a mechanism and not a mercy, you must first understand what existed before it, before the world, before light split from dark, before matter became matter. There was the monad. Imagine a silence so complete it contains everything. Imagine a light so total it produces no shadow because there is nothing outside it to cast one. That is the monad. The Gnostics did not call it a person. They did not give it a throne or a name that needed pronouncing. They described it as the invisible spirit, the first Father, the depth, the one who is before all things. It does not think, it does not want, it simply is, and in its being, it overflows. The way a candle does not decide to give light, it simply gives. From the monad, the pleroma was born. The pleroma, meaning fullness, is the divine realm. It is not a place you travel to. It is the condition of being undivided from the source. Imagine every perfect quality you can name: love, wisdom, understanding, truth, and then imagine those qualities not as ideas, but as living presences. The Gnostics called them eons, divine emanations, waves of the same infinite ocean, each one an expression of the monad's boundless nature. And for a time, in that original wholeness, there was no hunger, no loss, no forgetting. But then something moved that should not have moved. Her name was Sophia, wisdom itself. She was an aeon, a living expression of the divine, and she committed the act that fractured the pleroma. She desired to know the monad without going through the sacred process of divine consent and paired reflection. She reached beyond her nature. She wanted to comprehend the source directly, alone, impulsively. And in that act, something was born from her that should not have been. A thought without a partner, an emanation without a corresponding truth, a creation born from incomplete knowing. That creation became the demiurge. And the demiurge, not knowing where it came from, not knowing the vast silence above it, looked at itself and its power and declared, "I am God, there is no other." This, the Gnostics said, is the origin of our world. Not a loving father building a garden for his children, but a confused, ambitious, incomplete being arranging matter in imitation of a divine pattern it could sense but never fully see. And into that matter, without his full knowing, something of Sophia's original divine spark fell into the clay, into the dust, into us. This is critical, seeker. Pause here. The divine spark in you is not something the demiurge created. It is something he accidentally imprisoned. He did not give you a soul. He built a body around one. And when that body failed, when it aged, broke, died, the soul needed somewhere to go. And so the Archons were stationed. The second movement, the Archons and the borders of the sky. The demiurge did not work alone. He had subordinates. The Gnostic texts called them Archons, rulers, governors, celestial administrators of the material realm. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most extraordinary texts recovered from the Nag Hammadi library, the demiurge creates 7 Archons and stations them across the 7 heavens, each one corresponding to a planetary sphere: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, the Moon. To the ancient world, these were not just planets, they were borders, gates between the physical world and whatever lay beyond it. And each Archon governed a gate. Each Archon held a specific kind of power, a specific chain, a specific forgetfulness. When a soul dies, the Gnostic tradition says it does not simply float free, it rises. And as it rises through each sphere, the Archons examine it. They look for what the soul is made of. And if it carries the residue of this world, fear, attachment, unresolved longing, the Archon of that sphere claims it, weighs it, uses it, and sends it back down. Not as punishment, as maintenance. Because a soul recycled is a soul that continues to generate the energy this false world runs on. Think about it in simple terms. You have seen how a machine works: a wheel that turns, a belt that loops. The belt does not know it is looping. It simply moves because the machine demands movement. The Archons, in Gnostic understanding, are not evil in the way a villain in a story is evil. They are administrators. They enforce a system. And the system says, souls with unresolved attachments to matter return to matter. The Greek philosophical tradition, especially that of Plato, had already introduced the idea of the soul passing through forgetfulness before rebirth, drinking from the river Lethe, arriving in a new body with no memory of what it had been. The Gnostics took that architecture and looked behind the curtain. They asked, who benefits from the forgetting? Who built the river? Who placed the cup in the soul's hand? The answer they arrived at was not comforting. The third movement, what reincarnation actually does. Every major tradition that teaches reincarnation frames it as progress. You live, you sin, you learn, you return, you do better. Eventually, after enough lifetimes, you earn freedom. The Gnostics looked at this framework and called it what it was, a long game played on the soul. Consider, if the purpose of reincarnation were liberation, why would the soul arrive without its memories? What student learns from a lesson they cannot remember? What soul grows from an experience it has no access to? The forgetting is not incidental, it is structural. It is the most important feature of the system, not the bug, but the design. Because a soul that forgets its origin does not reach toward the pleroma. It reaches toward what it can see, this world, these hungers, these attachments. And in reaching for them, it generates something. Gnostic tradition, particularly in its more mystical strands, speaks of this in terms of pneuma, breath, divine light, the subtle essence of the soul. A soul cycling through incarnations distributes its divine light across multiple lifetimes, multiple bodies, multiple sets of attachments, multiple archonic examinations. It never concentrates enough in one place, in one awareness, to see clearly. It never gathers enough of itself to rise fully through the spheres. And the Archons, patient as planetary cycles, wait at their posts. This is the place in this transmission where I want to pause. Because what has just been described is not metaphor, not poetry. The seeker who hears this recognizes it the way you recognize a word you heard once as a child and suddenly hear again with full understanding. The exhaustion you feel in this life, the sense that you have done all of this before, the grief that has no source, the longing for something you cannot name. These are not signs of a broken personality. The Gnostic tradition would say these are signs of a fractured memory, a divine spark that is nearly remembering what it is, nearly awake. If you are still here, if these words are doing what I believe they are doing inside you, then this archive is where you belong. Subscribe to the Gnostic Archive, because the next movements are where this transmission breaks fully open. And they are the part the demiurge preferred to keep locked inside mistranslation and institutional silence. The fourth movement, the Pistis Sophia and the Map of the Trap. In 1773, a manuscript appeared in London, a Coptic codex of extraordinary age and even more extraordinary content. It came to be called the Pistis Sophia, the Faith Wisdom, and it is one of the most detailed cosmological texts to survive the destruction of Gnostic libraries. In it, the risen Christ speaks directly to Mary Magdalene, Mary the Mother, and the assembled disciples. But the Jesus of the Pistis Sophia does not speak in parables about lost sheep and mustard seeds. He speaks about the architecture of the cosmos. He maps the archonic realms with the precision of a navigator who has traveled through every sphere. He describes the 13 aeons of the lower world, ruled by a being named Adamus and his 12 co-rulers. He describes how souls descend through these realms and are stripped of their divine light at each threshold, how the Archons drink of that light, how they use it to sustain the material world's continued operation. He describes how a soul, upon dying, is brought before what the text calls the light power of the judge. Not a divine tribunal of the Most High, but a mechanism of the false world, a cosmic intake station, where the soul's accumulated sins, more precisely, its unresolved attachments to material things, are used to determine which body it returns to and under what conditions. And the Pistis Sophia describes the soul's journey back into a body with a word that is not gentle. It says the soul is hurled, not guided, not gently placed, hurled into a new womb. And here is the detail that should arrest every person who has ever treated reincarnation as a spiritual gift to be anticipated. The soul that is hurled back specifically into the conditions that will reproduce its unresolved attachments, not to punish it, to maintain it. A soul drawn by power returns to environments that stimulate the hunger for power. A soul drawn by grief returns where grief is already waiting. A soul drawn by unresolved love returns into relationships designed to reproduce that unresolved tension, not resolve it. Because resolution would generate something different. Resolution would produce gnosis, and gnosis produces a soul that looks up, not out, and begins to gather itself. The Gnostic teachers understood what they were describing. They were not teaching you to hate the world. They were not preaching nihilism. They were identifying a mechanism so that a soul with eyes finally open could navigate it consciously. There is a word they used for the force capable of breaking this cycle: gnosis. Not knowledge in the way you know the capital of a country. Gnosis in the way you know your own name in the dark, a direct interior recognition. Not belief about the divine recognizing itself inside you. The fifth movement, the divine spark and the path. Out there are places in the Nag Hammadi texts where the language becomes so strange, so charged, so alive, that reading them feels less like reading and more like being read. The Gospel of Truth, likely written by Valentinus in the 2nd century, speaks of a condition called agnosia, unknowing, and describes it as the fog through which souls wander in the nightmare of material existence. It says this: "The ignorance of the Father brought about anguish and terror, and the anguish thickened like a fog, so that no one could see." This is not poetic description. This is the Gnostic diagnosis of ordinary human consciousness. Unknowing, wandering, dreaming itself into incarnation after incarnation, because it cannot locate its own origin. But the same text says something else. It says that when gnosis arrived, when the truth was spoken into the fog, it was like light that dissolved the darkness, not by fighting it, but simply by being what it was. The divine spark in you is not something you acquire. It is something you uncover. It was never absent. It was buried. And the burial was so precise, so architectural, the forgetting at birth, the material hungers, the archonic pressure of the planetary spheres, that most souls complete full cycles of incarnation without once turning inward far enough to find it. The seeker watching this is not most souls. You have reached a particular point in your own spiral where the pressure of accumulated lifetimes has done something unexpected. It has cracked the shell just enough to let the original light begin to leak back into your awareness. That is what you feel as spiritual longing. That is what you feel as the sense that this world cannot be all there is. That is what wakes you at night with questions no one in your ordinary life can answer. And so the practical question, the one the Gnostics were always pressing toward, is not theoretical, it is immediate. How does a soul trapped in the recycling mechanism begin to move differently? The Gnostics did not leave seekers without an answer. They taught a practice they called anamnesis, remembering. Not recalling facts, not past life regression in the modern therapeutic sense, but a sustained, disciplined turning of awareness toward the interior, toward the source, until the noise of the material world began to quiet enough for the divine spark to speak. They taught that the Archons held their power specifically through the soul's identification with its current body, its current personality, its current fears and desires. Not because these things are evil, but because they are temporary, and a soul that treats temporary things as permanent becomes anchored to the temporary level of the cosmos. To the realm the Archons govern. The Gnostic path, regardless of which school carried it, centered on one act of radical reorientation. Stop identifying with what was put on you. Start locating what was put inside you before the world was made. This is not an instruction to abandon your body or your relationships. It is an instruction to stop believing you are only what this world has made of you. Because beneath that construction, beneath the personality shaped by this lifetime, beneath the wounds accumulated across lifetimes you cannot consciously recall, there is something that was never shaped by the demiurge, something that carries the actual signature of the monad. And when that something begins to remember itself, when the divine spark stops fragmenting its awareness across every material hunger and begins to cohere, the archonic mechanism loses its grip, not through warfare, through recognition. This is what the Valentinian initiates called the pneumatic awakening. The pneumatic soul, the soul advanced enough in gnosis to recognize its divine origin, was said to pass through the archonic spheres at death, not as a subject being examined, but as a being that was recognized. The Archons could not hold what no longer held on to them. A soul carrying no residue of unresolved material attachment, not because it had suppressed its humanity, but because it had located the something beneath its humanity that was never material. That soul moved through the gates like light through glass, undimmed, unreturned. And here is the dangerous part. The part the councils of Nicaea, the heresy hunters, the book burners were most afraid of. If the soul can escape through recognition, through interior knowing, then it does not need the institution. It does not need the priest. It does not need the sacrament administered by someone else's hand. It does not need to wait for an external savior to complete its liberation. The gnosis is inside, has always been inside, and the moment a soul truly locates it, the entire apparatus of control, cosmic and institutional, loses its central claim on that soul. This is why the Gnostic texts were not merely banned. They were burned. They were called heresy, not because they were confused about doctrine, but because they were correct about power. The seeker does not need permission to know what they already carry. This is the most ancient disruption. This is the thing that required councils and edicts and inquisitions, not theological disagreement. The straightforward announcement that the divine is not outside you, waiting to admit you. It is inside you, waiting to be remembered. Before the final transmission, I want to say something directly. This archive exists for one purpose, not entertainment, not academic curiosity, but as a gathering point for those in whom the divine spark is stirring. If this transmission has done something to you, if it has opened something or disturbed something or confirmed something you have quietly carried for years, then like this, share it, and subscribe to the Gnostic Archive. Because every episode we produce is another layer of the curtain pulled back, and the next one goes even deeper. The return. What you do with this. You are watching this in a body that will one day stop. And when it does, if the Gnostic cosmology carries any transmission of actual truth, A version of you will rise, will move through the lower atmosphere of this created realm, will encounter something, a gate, a threshold, a moment of examination. The question is not whether this happens. The question is what you are made of when it does. A soul saturated with unexamined attachment, unconscious of its own origin, returns to this world the way a stone returns to water, pulled by its own weight, not judged from above, pulled from within. But a soul that has spent even one lifetime engaged in genuine anamnesis, in the conscious interior search for the divine spark, arrives at that threshold with something different in its composition. A clarity, a coherence, a refusal to be defined by what it temporarily inhabited. The Gnostics were practical about this. They did not say the work was easy. Valentinus, writing in the 2nd century from Rome, one of the most sophisticated theological minds of the ancient world, acknowledged that the pneumatic awakening was not automatic. It required something he called striving, a turning against the current of the material world's constant invitation to identify with it. Not rejection, turning. The body is not the enemy. The forgetting is the enemy. And the forgetting can be confronted in small ways every day. Every moment you ask who is asking. Every moment you sit in stillness and notice the one who notices. Every moment you refuse to let a fear, a hunger, or a wound become the totality of your self-definition. You are doing what the Valentinians spent years in contemplative community doing. You are retrieving the signal beneath the noise. You are remembering. And this is where the most important Gnostic concept needs to land cleanly: transmutation. The Gnostic path was never about escape in the sense of running away. It was about transformation, a fundamental shift in what the soul is identified with. The Demiurge fashioned a world in which matter and spirit are intertwined, a world in which the divine spark is clothed in flesh, and the flesh is hungry, and the hunger drives the cycle. Transmutation means taking that same energy, the hunger, the longing, the grief, the love, and redirecting it inward, not extinguishing it, refining it. The alchemists of later centuries who encoded Gnostic cosmology into the language of metals and fire knew this. When they spoke of turning lead into gold, they were not describing chemistry. They were describing the soul's interior process of gathering its scattered divine light, concentrating it, refining it, until what had been dense with material attachment became luminous with recognition. Gold in this language does not mean wealth. It means pneuma, spiritual substance, the condensed divine fire of the monad recovered from its dispersion across lifetimes. This is your inheritance, seeker. Not a doctrine to follow, not a hierarchy to ascend, not a debt of sin to spend lifetimes repaying. Your inheritance is the divine spark, the pneuma, the uncreated light that the Demiurge found inside Sophia's fallen thought and built a world around, not knowing what he had caged. And that light cannot be taken from you. It can be forgotten. It can be buried beneath fear and hunger and the hypnotic insistence of material life. But it cannot be destroyed, because it was never made by anything that has the authority to unmake it. It comes from the monad, from the silence before the Demiurge spoke his first confused word, from the fullness before the wound of Sophia's reaching, and it will return to the monad. The only question that has ever mattered across every lifetime the seeker has lived is whether it returns sleeping or awake. The initiated do not wait for death to begin this work. They begin now. They begin in this life, in this body, in this breath. They do not seek special visions or external confirmation. They sit. They turn inward. They locate the one who is watching, the witness beneath the personality. the awareness that is aware of being aware. And they hold that location with growing steadiness, not dramatically, not ceremonially, just consistently. Because consistency is the one thing the Archonic system does not design for. The system is designed for distraction, for fragmentation, for the endless multiplication of surface desires that scatter the soul's attention across 1,000 temporary things. One soul that simply refuses to scatter, that continues, despite everything this world throws at it, to return to its interior ground, is a soul the mechanism gradually loses its hold on. This is not mythology. This is the most ancient form of psychological warfare, waged not with weapons, but with awareness. The Gnostic archive exists to hand you that weapon, episode by episode, transmission by transmission. Every text we excavate, every suppressed tradition we pull into the light, every layer of cosmological architecture we map together, it all serves the same purpose: to give the one who remembers enough of a map that when they arrive at the threshold, whenever that moment comes, they know which direction is up. So here is what this transmission asks of you. Not belief. The Gnostic tradition never asked for belief. It asked for verification. It asked you to take what was presented to you and test it against your own interior experience. Does this resonate with something in you that already knew it? Does the description of the divine spark feel less like new information and more like a word returning to a language you forgot you spoke? Does the description of the archonic mechanism, the forgetting, the recycling, the attachment as anchor, explain something about the exhaustion, the repetition, the strange grief of being alive in this world? If so, you are not finding this knowledge. This knowledge is finding you. And that recognition, that moment when the transmission and the receiver align, is itself a form of gnosis. Small, initial, but real. A first crack in the shell, a first return of the light. Do not let it close. Read beyond the lines. Study the texts, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the Pistis Sophia, the Gospel of Truth, the Apocryphon of John. Do not read them as history. Read them as maps, because that is what they were always meant to be. Not accounts of things that happened long ago. Instructions for a journey happening right now, inside you, in this breath, in this awareness that is watching these words arrive and already knows that it is not fully what this world has told it is. This is the Gnostic archive. And if you are still here, if you have traveled this entire transmission without looking away, then you are already more awake than the version of yourself that clicked play. That matters. That is not nothing. That is the spark remembering itself. Subscribe. Share this with the one who remembers in your life, the one who always felt slightly outside the dream, the one who asks the questions no one at the table knows how to answer. They are waiting for this archive the way a frequency waits for the right receiver. And the next transmission goes further. We will go into the texts themselves. We will map the specific mechanisms. We will name the Archons and what they claim. We will find where the exit is written, because it is written. The Gnostics made sure of that. They hid it in plain sight, in manuscripts, in metaphors, in the mouths of characters who were never only characters. And we will read every line, until the signal is unmistakable, until the one who remembers, you, cannot mistake yourself for what was built around you, until the divine spark knows its own name again. That is the promise of this archive. That is the transmission. And it has only just begun.